who better to give us his overview on the current state of American politics than the US-based political analyst, host of The Dive, and all-round, all-American guy, Jackson Hinkle. Jackson, welcome back after some time onto the mother of all talk shows. I don't know if the American people know just what a figure of fun Joe Biden is becoming. I'm not sure if it's fun or tragedy or both. Do the American people know that?
You'd hope that they do, but there's a lot of Americans who still claim that they would support Joe Biden in a 2024 candidacy, which is just insane. But less and less Americans support Biden as the days go on. And I don't think it has anything to do, unfortunately, with his mental decline, because that's been apparent for years on end before he even entered the White House. I think it has to do with the decline of the state of our country. It has to do with the fact that he is responsible for the Nord Stream bombings. It has to do with the fact that he's taking us to war with not just Russia, but China as well. And, there's been a series of pretty damning leaks that have come out over the past several months surrounding his son, Hunter Biden, and these Twitter files and what the Biden administration is doing to censor everyday Americans. I think that's what's turning the tide. But for me, of course, the mental decline is reason enough to not give him a first or second chance to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, before we leave that point, and I agree with you, it's not the only point, but before we leave that point, this man is, at least nominally, in control of thousands of thermonuclear weapons. He has the power not to declare war, but to start war, and is the commander-in-chief of an armed force on which as much money has been spent as has been spent collectively by the next, I think it's 16 countries in the world. That makes him capable of ending the world, and he's not really capable of being sent out safely for a loaf, or as my good friend Lionel puts it, would you let Joe Biden drive you home from the airport? And if the answer to that is no, why are you allowing him to be in charge of the fate of the world?
Yeah, I wouldn't let him drive me home from the airport, and I wouldn't let him babysit my kids either. So there's two things that I think are pretty stark problems with the president of the United States. But and he's at the White House press corps dinner. He's making jokes this week about how he doesn't take questions from any of them. And anytime he gets before the press, he just smiles and walks off before they have any time to ask him questions. So it really is insane. And I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. I think, obviously, as with age, it's sad, but as the days go on, he's going to deteriorate more and more and more. And that's why he's definitely not going to be having any debates with, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Marianne Williamson. Think what you want of these individuals, of these candidates, but they deserve a debate, I think. I mean, we live in a country where this sort of thing is treasured. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is definitely bringing up some pretty good points. Unfortunately, the Biden administration is not only refusing to debate him or Marianne or any other candidate, but the Biden administration appears to be influencing not just big tech, but also now mainstream media cable companies to censor his opposing candidates like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., which is illegal and unconstitutional. And it's just very troubling for the future of our country.
Yeah, we'll come back to RFK if we can, but you mentioned, and I do see her name now, Marianne Williamson. Forgive my ignorance, I know nothing at all about her, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's watching that doesn't. Give us a kind of pen picture of who she is and what she stands for.
Personally, I'm not a big fan of Marianne Williamson. She's a woke warrior, and she's, I would say, tantamount to like the equivalent of Bernie Sanders today. Once champion of all things that seem to be good, but now has just proven to be an utter fraud and a tool of the Democratic Party and the deep state. I think the only reason why she's running is so she can sell more of her books. She has books that she's trying to sell. Not many people are buying. But, it's sad because these are the people who a couple of years ago were saying we need to oppose war in the war state. And now they're saying we're not sending enough money to Ukraine. And, I think we should be concerned about Taiwan next,
Well, let's draw a veil over Marianne quickly. I wish I hadn't asked. RFK, on the other hand, he's hitting some bull's eyes, on issue after issue. He is managing to be a bridge, managing to unite people that would have regarded themselves as being on the left and people that would have regarded themselves as being on the right. That's quite a formidable talent, isn't it?
It is. Over 50% of Democratic voters say that they have a favorable view of RFK Jr. It looks like he's polling at about 18% right now. Marianne Williamson's polling at 16%. Joe Biden seems to be claiming the rest of the votes. And that's much better than I think a lot of people assumed RFK Jr. was going to be doing right out of the gate. Not only that, but the famed American political strategist Roger Stone put forward the idea of a Trump-Kennedy ticket in 2024, which I think is very interesting. As with any candidate or any person, I can't say I agree with them all the time on everything. And even some of the issues I hold most near and dear to my heart, the guy doesn't perfectly align. But when you have a candidate for president polling at 18% in a primary who's saying that he wants to close down all of the foreign U.S. military bases, I think we have over 700 of them. And he says that he wants to take down big pharma and, remove their ability to completely control the press in this country. I think that should be celebrated.
Now, on the subject of press and media, there have been, of course, quite seismic events. I was ruminating on them earlier today with an important media guy. This sacking of Tucker Carlson, a man who was regularly turning in with every show, 3 million audience, in other words, a little over double our audience on the mother of all talk shows. He was getting paid $1.6 million a month for his achievement. I'm not paid that for mine or anything at all. But he was in the small whirlpool of American television audiences nowadays, a big hitter. And he was scoring these numbers because he was, on some subjects at least, not just telling the truth fearlessly and eloquently, but telling truths that would not be allowed to appear anywhere else. And lo and behold, hey presto, are now not allowed on Fox News. He's been sacked, but he took to Twitter to speak to us next, and 65 million people, not 3 million, 65 million people. Are we witnessing the death of terrestrial TV, do you think, Jackson?
Well, if there's no one interesting on the mainstream media and the corporate press, then of course it's the death of it. After they fired Tucker Carlson, and some people are asking the question, was it truly a mutual departure of Tucker's absence from Fox News? No, he was fired. He was let know 10 minutes prior to being fired that this was the decision that Fox executives had made. And I guess they're still negotiating his exit package, but he was fired, and this is the end of the end. Fox News's prime time viewership sunk below MSNBC's viewership last night for the first time in I don't know how long, definitely before Tucker Carlson was there. This is a clear indication that Tucker was a popular voice. It's not that anyone trusts the mainstream media, and without him, it's null and void.
Yeah, I mean, it feels that way to me. I mean, let me make the now compulsory a caveat that there are many, many things I entirely disagree with Tucker Carlson about, but some important things on which I agree with him. But none of that is relevant. What is relevant is that we have access to lots of different voices, lots of different points of view. Isn't that what American capitalism was supposed to be about? Let the customer pick from a free choice the voices, the programs, the points of view that they like. Isn't that what free enterprise was supposed to be about?
It was, freedom in the marketplace. That's why we've got to censor any dissidents and sanction any countries that we don't like, right? But Tucker, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, he spoke at the United Nations in New York City last week, and he said that with Tucker Carlson gone from Fox News, it's not only very troubling, but it's clear that without him, there will be a severe loss in the diversity of views held in the mainstream press corps in the United States. And that's not because Tucker carried with him a lot of other co-hosts on Fox News, of course, that carried the same line or echoed the same points. He was the only one. He was the only one who spoke out about the wars in Ukraine, China, even a little bit towards the end of his time there, Syria, Venezuela, coup attempts, stopping Trump's warmongering against Iran and Syria and Afghanistan. I mean, the guy challenged both party orthodoxies. And yeah, there's things that I disagree with him on as well, of course. But when you talk about the issues that matter most, Julian Assange and the permanent war state and censorship in this country, I think he was right on the money.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not that the people who thought that are going to shrug and say, well, I'll watch some no-mark that's now in his chair, because 2/3 of the audience disappeared after Carlson was sacked. So the people who liked hearing Tucker Carlson are going to want to continue hearing him. They'll migrate to wherever else he goes, and it won't be MSNBC, I hazard a guess. It will not be CNN. It will be presumably to what are now the outer limits, but which are perhaps rapidly becoming the new mainstream. I think we're living in quite revolutionary times in terms of media, don't you?
It's all changing. For the first time, this public square, if you will, is being reinvented as to where we can air out our opinions freely. And I think in this coming presidential election, you're going to see that more and more with the censorship of Democrats like Bobby K. Jr. and probably Republicans like Trump. I think we're going to see more and more voices probably trying to get their message across on platforms like Twitter or like Rumble. But they still have their problems, and hopefully they'll be fixed. I mean, I still think that you are suppressed in the algorithm. And for a while, Elon kept your Russian state-affiliated media tag up, which was just insane. So they still have their problems. They're not perfect, but it's much better than what we had just a few years ago, where any and all major platforms were completely controlled by big tech, and there was no alternatives.
I was just ruminating for a second there, Jackson, about that dream team that you floated in front of our eyes, en passant. Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy Jr. in double harness would be unstoppable in the presidential election. Don't you think? I mean, I've never thought of that one before. It seems so too incongruous. But actually, there are many things on which they agree. And if they could get an agreed manifesto, program for government, and so on, that could be an unstoppable ticket.
I think it would be unstoppable. I think Trump is already pretty unstoppable. But I think adding Kennedy, a Democrat, lifelong Democrat, to the mix, someone who comes from a family of American royalty, I think that would be entirely unstoppable. My only question about it is, when you get into those very powerful families in any country, sometimes they have their disagreements and, personal spats that go back decades. And I don't know. I definitely seems like the Trump family is not that close with the Kennedy family or the Cuomo family, which are connected now. But we'll see. Maybe they'll put those spats aside and choose the greater good for our country and unite. I think it would be pretty beautiful.
If Trump were to promise to reopen the Kennedy files, who killed Jack Kennedy, who killed Bobby Kennedy, which actually sent Trump a letter during his presidency encouraging him to do, that would put the cat amongst the pigeons and might even be an incentive to Bobby to hook up with him in double harness in an election campaign. I could talk to you all night. Jackson Hinkle, thanks for joining us on the mother
Thank you.
of all talk shows.